Welcome everybody to today's webinar, How to Stay Off the CX Loser List. I'm Samantha with the marketing department at Calidus Cloud CX, and I'll be your host today. So let's take a look at our agenda. I will introduce our featured speaker, Annette Franz, as well as very briefly introduce Calidus Cloud CX. And then Annette is going to walk us through the telltale signs of why companies end up on the customer experience loser list. And we've certainly seen a fair share of those recently. We won't name any names, but we have seen a handful of CX losers lately. And then on the positive side, Annette's going to guide us on how to practice the habits of CX winners, which is really the important part. And then we'll close by taking questions from you, our attendees, and this is, I think, a pretty juicy subject, so I really do hope that you chime in with your questions and your comments throughout the presentation. Go ahead and type them in at any time, and then Annette and I will address those at the end of the session. Now, moving on to our presenter slide. Again, I'm Samantha, and I have been with Calidus Cloud for a little more than 5 years now. I'm originally from the ClickTools side of the business, the enterprise feedback and survey technology side of the business. And I've been doing this kind of marketing work in content and communications for B2B tech companies for about 17 years. Now, our featured speaker today is Annette Franz, and she's the CEO of CX Journey and is a certified customer experience professional. She's also CEM certified and is an active member of the Customer Experience Professionals Association, which most of us on this call know as the CXPA. Now, on top of being a well-known speaker and blogger, and I should point out a regular contributor to our very own Calidus Cloud CX blog, Annette is hired to advise leading companies on how to improve their customer and employee experience, and we are absolutely thrilled to welcome her to this event today. Thanks, Annette. Now, before I do hand things over to what we all came here for today to listen to her, let me just quickly introduce Calidus Cloud CX. If you don't mind going to the next slide.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Annette. So very, very briefly, Calidus Cloud CX is a somewhat new division of the parent company Calidus Cloud, and we launched this brand earlier this year. The brand encompasses our former ClickTools and Badgeville technologies for enterprise feedback and gamification, and it also includes several new and exciting solutions for customer and employee engagement and learning. The suite also offers a few new technologies that drive sales and service performance, which I will touch on a little bit later as it relates to what Annette is going to be talking about. My final note before I hand things over for the real deal is that we are recording today's session, so look for an email from us later with a link to that recording. And again, as a final reminder, please feel free to just enter your questions into the question area at any time during the presentation, and Annette and I will be speaking to as many of those as time allows, okay? So with that, I will hand things over to Annette.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you for that awesome introduction. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today as well. We know that it's summertime and it's you all got busy schedules, so we really appreciate you joining us today. And this is such a great topic too: how to stay off the CX loser list. And I know a lot of companies don't want to acknowledge that they're CX losers, or that they may actually fall onto this list, or that they're having a tough time moving ahead with their CX initiatives, or focusing on what's right for the customer. So this is a fun topic for me to talk about always, because I love making sure that companies are doing what's right and doing the right things for their customers. So why don't we just go ahead and dive in? I usually like to start all of my presentations with a definition of what customer experience is. Now, I know probably most of you know what customer experience is, but there are a lot of different definitions out there. So just bear with me for a second here as I go through what or how I define it. It is the sum of all of the interactions that a customer has with an organization over the life of the relationship with that company, and the feelings, the emotions, and the perceptions that the customer has about those interactions. So it's not just about what you're doing with the company or how you're interacting with them. It's how you feel about and the emotions and the perceptions that you have about those interactions, and about how well the company is performing and helping you do what it is that you need to do. So we can't talk about what customer experience is without talking about what it is not. And customer experience is not customer service. They are not one and the same. And when I hear people using them interchangeably, it's like nails on a chalkboard. They're definitely not the same thing. So here's how I usually like to distinguish between the two. And I borrow this from Chris Zane with Zane Cycles every time I talk about this. He says that customer service is what happens when the experience breaks down. And I think that's a great way to look at it and a great way to make a distinction between the two. And I really think that if companies are thinking that these are one and the same, that's probably one of the first signs that the company is on the CX loser list. And the reason for that is that the customer experience is about a journey, and it's not just about individual touch points, right? And customer service is an individual touch point. Why are we here to talk about customer experience? Why this focus? Why now? There's a ton of reasons. We know, there are a lot of examples out there of companies who are CX losers, who are delivering terrible experiences for their customers. As Sam mentioned, there's a lot of examples, especially lately. But I'm going to focus on just two things right now. The first one is that customer experience is a differentiator. It's in this world where products and services, it's all becoming more and more commoditized every day. Customer experience is really the only true differentiator. We know that customers are willing to pay more for a better experience. So really what happens is that takes price off the table as a differentiator. That used to be a differentiator for a lot of folks, price and value. Now it's value and customer experience as a differentiator. The second one that I like to focus on is the fact, and why I really, really like to focus on customer experience, is that so many people have been told lately that they're going to do CX. I call this being voluntold. And what that means is that you've been put into this position as the unofficial, official customer experience professional in your organization, even though it's not your day job. You're coming from marketing or customer service or training or whatever it is, and somebody said, hey, we heard about this thing called customer experience. We want you to do CX. And I clearly put do CX in air quotes because we can't just do CX. Customer experience is really all about a culture shift, a mindset shift, and a behavioral shift. And there are so many folks that are getting into this profession today that we need to talk about it on a regular basis to make sure that everybody's on the same page, that everybody knows what it means, what it is, how that shift happens, and what the foundational elements are for a successful customer experience transformation. A lot of companies are really struggling with the need to focus on customer experience. So again, that's why we're here. That's why we're talking about this every day. That's why I talk about it every day, is because I'm very passionate about making sure that everybody understands why customer experience is important, and that you can't just do CX, and that you need to have these basics in place to deliver a great experience. What we have right now is companies that are just making cosmetic changes and calling those customer experience improvements. Really what they're doing is they're just giving lip service and not making those structural changes to the organization, to their processes, to the people they hire, to the way that they train, to the way that they deliver the experience. They're not doing those kinds of things to really make an impact on the customer and the customer experience. We've seen plenty of examples of lip service, of this kind of lip service lately. Case in point, need I say more? There are plenty of examples in the airline industry that we could share lately about bad experiences. And trust me, they're not the only industry with this problem. And I don't mean to pick on the airline industry, but seriously, there have been a lot of issues with in this industry lately. Over the years, they've shared videos, and they've touted how much they focus on customer experience and the employee experience. You're sitting there on a flight, you're waiting for the flight takeoff, and the CEO of the airlines come on the video and talk about the great things that they're doing for their customers and the great things that they're doing for their employees. But then they have one major bad event, and that breaks all of that and exposes the real myth behind their their focus. So lip service is not a good thing. You've got to be doing the things that really ground your organization in the customer and the customer experience. So bear with me for a few minutes. I'm not going to talk a lot about statistics and charts and all of that, but I wanted to throw out a couple of slides here with the sad state of affairs that we are in when it comes to the customer experience and why we need to really focus and where the ROI is. So this is the first one. I love showing this slide because this is the American Customer Satisfaction Index. It was developed by the University of Michigan back in 1994. It is comprised of 3 questions about customer expectations, perceived quality, and perceived value. These questions are really a loose proxy for the experience. So when we take a look at the very first measurement back in 1994, 23 years ago, their index was a 74.8. There were some peaks and valleys over the last 23 years, but during their last measurement period, which was in Q3 of 2016, the score was at 75.4. Not even a full point higher than it was 23 years ago. So again, we haven't made much progress. We have not made much progress at all. Here's another chart that I love, and this is, Forrester refers to their losers and winners as CX leaders and CX laggards based on how the companies rank in the research that they do. Basically what they did here is over the last 6 months, they looked at the relationship between superior customer experience and superior revenue growth. If you want ROI, this is a great example of customer experience ROI. What they did is they picked pairs of competitors from 5 different industries, and they picked one company that had significantly higher customer experience score versus another company that was obviously the laggard. They did it for 5 different industries: cable, airlines, investments, retail, and health insurance. And then they built this model, compared the compounded average revenue growth of the leaders and the laggards between 2010 and 2014. And these were their findings. There was a real clear correlation between a superior customer experience and superior revenue growth. Look at it, it's almost a 6x difference there. So again, if you need ROI, this is a great example of ROI. Okay, and lastly, one last chart. This is one that I'd love to share whenever I'm talking about why it's important to focus on customer experience. The outcomes are real. This research has been done by John Foucault at Watermark Consulting for the last several years. This is his last read. It's from 2014, 2015. He had focused purely on the insurance industry, but this was his last global read for 2014. Comparing again the CX leaders and the CX laggards from the Forrester index to their performance on the S&P 500. Again, the results here are very clear. And every year that he's done this research, we've seen this. CX leaders constantly outperform the market. CX laggards constantly underperform the market. Look, in this case, they're 35 points higher than the S&P 500. So this is the last of the stats that I'm going to show you for the moment, but just wanted to make a clear point that there is value in focusing on the customer experience. There are real outcomes when we focus on the customer experience. Okay, so why am I focusing on losers? Well, because we don't want you to be one. We want you to be winners, right? I'm going to show you some famous losers who were able to turn things around and create successful brands. It took them a while. They had a lot of fails. It was a lot of hard work, but they did it. So if you find your company on the CX loser list, which I know there are more on the loser list than there are on the winner list, unfortunately, all hope isn't lost. I'm going to show you 5 brands that are great examples of why being a loser does not equate to all hope is lost. There is lots of hope out there. Real quick, the lessons from these 5 before I show them to you. Big success is often built on big failure. Just do the work. Just do it. Get the foundational elements in place. And lastly, persistence. You will see when I show you these 5 examples, persistence is key. And we know that. I recently interviewed several CCOs, and one of the common themes across the 5 interviews that I did was persistence. We need to get up every day and do this every day and never let up. So that's a huge lesson from these folks. So let me go to the first one. The first loser was Walt Disney. He was fired because he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. Imagine that. Imagine that. Because what we have today is a brand that is thriving and that is the poster child for a great customer experience. I mean, it's crazy. Steve Jobs, he wanted to make revolutionary products, but was ousted from his own company. Yeah, his products weren't all a success. I mean, look at Apple Newton and Next Computers. But the Apple brand is another example of when companies do great things for the customer, great things happen for the business. Henry Ford, another great example. 2 of his companies failed and he went bankrupt 5 times. In the end, he actually revolutionized the auto industry. He created a more efficient assembly line and he created mass production techniques that made cars more affordable. The interesting thing that I read about him as I was doing this research for this presentation was that he viewed his employees as consumers. He viewed them as his customers and said, what can I do to make cars more affordable for them? And that was his catalyst for developing the mass production techniques that ended up actually making the cars more affordable for customers. Colonel Sanders, he was fired from dozens of jobs. When he was 62, he lived in his car and he sold fried chicken door to door and in restaurants, and it was rejected 1,009 times. Today, KFC has about 20,000 locations in 123 countries. And they have a measly annual revenue of, $25 billion. And the last one, Sir James Dyson. He went through 5,126 failed prototypes and his life savings over the course of 15 years. And if you know his products, you know that number 5,127 was a huge hit. The man is now worth $4.5 billion. So you can see being a loser isn't the end of the world, only if you persist. I'm telling you, persistence is the key here. Get up every day and keep trying. You may get pushback from executives. You may get pushback from other employees. You may get pushback from whomever, but keep persisting. Keep getting your message out there. Keep doing it. Keep moving forward, learn and adapt, and eventually you will find success. Okay, so that was losers in general, losing brands in general, but what about CX losers, right? Why are we focusing on CX losers rather than the winners? Because failure to change is fatal. Look at these brands. Look at these brands here. You know where they are today, and there are plenty of other logos that I could have put on this slide, right? There are plenty of other logos. Companies don't change because they want to. They change because they're forced to by their customers, by the competition, by advances in science and technology, by government regulation and other things. Only when change is being forced on them do they try to change. Instead, what they need to do is be proactive and be innovative. And that change can only happen when executives are bought in, committed, and lead the effort. And that change is necessary if you're on the CX loser list. Otherwise, you're going to end up where these brands have all ended up. The difference between being a winner and a loser when it comes to customer experience is apparent. You and I know that when we interact with a CX winner brand, it's way different from when we interact with a CX loser business. It just feels better and it feels right. All right, I promised I won't do too many more slides with charts on them, but here's one more. We're almost done with the charts. We're about to get into the behaviors of the CX losers. So just 1 or 2 more charts here. Why else do we focus on CX losers? There's this thing called the CX perception gap. This is insane, and I think most of you have probably heard about this, but 80% of executives think that they are delivering this superior experience, but only 8% of customers agree. That spells losers to me. Lip service and a failure to grasp reality, for lack of a better way of putting it, but they aren't understanding their customers. They're not listening to their customers, right? Why does the gap exist? It's probably not because they failed to recognize the importance of their customers. When Bain did this research, they actually found that more than 95% of management teams that they surveyed claimed to be customer focused. They have a funny way of showing it, that's for sure. All right, last chart here, one last reason, and really the only reason why we're talking about this and why we're focusing on CX losers today, and that is customers. So many companies just don't care about customers. Look at this research from the Rockefeller Foundation. The top 2 reasons that customers leave companies are because they don't believe that the companies care about them and they're dissatisfied with their service. Another 9% just aren't even strongly committed to the brand because clearly the brand doesn't make the customer a priority. So they're very easily persuaded to go and to try a competitor. So these are the reasons why we're focusing on CX losers today. I'm going to just throw it out to you, Sam, for any comments and thoughts before I get into the real meat of our presentation today.
Yeah, thanks for asking. And I mean, this actually, I love this slide because this actually reminds me of some of the work we've been doing lately on the subject of customer sentiment, and how emotions like trust and respect and admiration factor into the CX mix. We did a webinar, just as a side note, we did a webinar last month on trust in digital systems and how people actually have to trust the systems they're using in order to perform well in their jobs. And beyond that, so I've been researching this a bit, and I actually blogged about it last week, that it turns out that emotion is the primary driver of positive customer experience and loyalty, actually. So it's interesting to me that you use the word care here, or the Rockefeller Foundation, used the word care, because care, of course, relates to feelings, and we're learning more and more that how customers feel about you, and I am putting an emphasis on the word feel, how they feel about you matters more than what they quantitatively think. So for example, they may think you have great products, but if you treat them badly and they feel that you don't care about them, they won't buy your great products. And research shows that they'll actually take an inferior or even a more expensive product in exchange for a superior customer experience. And I think that relates directly back to your slide right here, which is that look at the gap between 68% and 14%, where they care more about the relationship, the human psychology of feeling that they have a connection with your brand than they do with your actual service.
Yeah, this is powerful stuff. I agree. There's been a lot of talk, and that's probably a big key word for us. And some might think it's a buzzword, but emotion is such a big thing for us to be thinking about today as we think about designing a great experience. So thanks for that. I appreciate that. Okay, let's dive into the meat of the presentation right now and talk about those 9 behaviors of CX losers and what, if you're on that CX loser list, what you can do to become a CX winner. Let me start first with a definition of what a CX loser is. It's a company that doesn't understand its customers and doesn't take the customer into account in all that it does. The customer is not a priority. In a nutshell, the customer and the employee are not priorities. These companies still believe that old management mantra, which is, we're in business to maximize shareholder value, and haven't yet adopted Drucker's thinking on this, which is, that we're in business to create and to nurture a customer. So there are a ton of reasons why companies are considered CX losers. I'm going to touch on, like I said, I'm going to touch on 9 of them. I'm going to touch on the foundational elements. So the things that you've got to have in place to make sure that you can get moved over onto the CX winner list. I know there's a lot of studies and research out there that get into both the strategic and the tactical things that happen when you're a CX loser, but I'm going to focus more on those foundational elements. So let me just dive in and start with the first one, which is failure to have a CX vision. I love this Yogi Berra saying, if you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else, right? The other saying that I like is, what happens in vagueness stays in vagueness. It couldn't be more true. If you don't know what you're trying to do and trying to achieve, how will you know when you get there? How will you get there? So your customer experience vision is really an inspirational and aspirational description of the experience that you are intending to deliver for your customers. Without that vision, and typically that CX vision is tied very closely, or even the same as your corporate vision, you can't transform the culture or deliver an intended experience or that desired experience. It's really the North Star for your employees, and it allows them to say yes or no to something that they're asked to do for a customer or for the business, if it, saying yes or no if it fits or it doesn't fit, right? So it allows them to evaluate what they're doing and ensure that it aligns with the vision of the organization and the vision for the customer. So how do you become a CX winner? Well, you've got to obviously define and develop your vision. What I've got here is examples of several companies that are often regarded as CX winners. Warby Parker at the top of the list is absolutely one of the hottest and brightest companies out there today, and people love buying from them and interacting with them. You've got to define your vision. There's a lot of work that goes into that. It's not just a bunch of people sitting around and coming up with a statement and saying, hey, let's make that our vision. That's not how a CX vision is defined. It's a lot of research and a lot of customer understanding that goes into it. You can't design or describe a future state if you don't know what your current state is. And so understanding the key drivers of customer satisfaction and loyalty, understanding customer needs and expectations, you've got to do all of that work in order to develop your CX vision. It can't be vague or ambiguous. So looking at these CX visions here, the one that is a little questionable to me perhaps is the State Farm vision. Remarkable. What does that mean? If I'm an employee and I need to deliver a remarkable experience every day for every customer and every interaction, I get the rest of that. But what do you mean when you tell me that I need to be remarkable? So the other thing that needs to happen with this CX vision is that if it's not clear, and if your employees don't understand what it is, because they've got to live it and breathe it, if it's not clear, you need to explain it to them in a simple and easy way so that they know, remarkable. It just reminds them every day in every interaction and everything that they do. Is that remarkable? Yeah, maybe. Is it not? Okay, maybe not, right? So they've got to be able to do that evaluation. The Ritz-Carlton one is awesome. We've always seen great things coming out of Ritz-Carlton. Ritz-Carlton experience enlivens the senses, instills well-being, and fulfills even the unexpressed wishes and needs of our guests. We've seen a ton of examples coming out of the Ritz-Carlton that relate to that, and it's very clear for their employees to understand what that means. So they can't be vague or ambiguous. They need to be communicated to the employees across the entire organization, regardless of channel, business unit, whatever. Everybody is marching to the same beat. Everybody's understanding the same vision and working toward that same vision. It needs to be simple, clear, compelling, and easy to understand. It's realistic and achievable, and it needs to motivate and inspire your employees. And if it's not realistic and achievable, it's not going to motivate or inspire. The other visions, CX visions that are shown here, are very straightforward and very simple. I think they're easy to understand. If you have any questions about these later, I would love to get your thoughts, and I'd love to hear, post in the chat, in the questions there, what your vision is, what your CX vision is, if you have one, and if you feel like yours is clear and understandable and simple and easy for employees to use to deliver the experience that the organization would like to have delivered for its customers. Okay, let's look at the next CX loser behavior: failing to understand the customer. It's really critical for us to understand our customers. Again, who are you in business for, right? We need to understand their viewpoint, their needs, their pain points, their desired outcomes, the jobs they're trying to achieve, what's important to them and what's not. I love this picture here because it is a great example of what happens when we don't understand our customer. Some engineer decided to design the sidewalk so that if you look over here on the right, that sidewalk is going way over there off into the right. And then there's another sidewalk to get over the bridge further back in the scene there. But what happened is pedestrians went, I don't want to walk all the way over there to the right and then come back just to go to the bridge. I just want to go to the bridge from here. And they took a path across the grass and they created their own way to get there. And that's what happens when we don't understand our customers and what they're trying to do. They will create their own path. They will use your products in ways that are appropriate for them, or they won't use your products because they don't meet their needs. So this is just a great metaphor for why it's important to understand your customers. How do we become a CX winner? There are 3 ways that you can achieve customer understanding: listen, characterize, and empathize. Listen, this one's pretty straightforward. We need to listen to our customers We need to, not just through surveys, but listen wherever they are, whether it's through social media, online reviews, customer advisory, whatever it is. There are a lot of different ways that we can listen to our customers and really understand what their needs are and how well we're performing against their needs and helping them do what it is that they need to do. The second one is to characterize them. Now, characterize really is a nice word for creating personas. What you're going to do is you're going to research your customers, you're going to identify the jobs they're trying to do, and compile these key personas that represent various types of customers and prospects that might buy or use your products. And then the third way to understand our customers is to empathize with them. And really what I'm talking about here is journey mapping. We walk in our customers' shoes to understand the steps that they take to do whatever it is that they're trying to do with the organization. So map the journeys to really understand the current state of the experience from the customer's viewpoint. These are 3 great ways that you can get started to understanding your customers. The next CX loser behavior is failing to act and redesign, right? We've done all this great listening and empathizing and characterizing and understanding, but a lot of companies just stop there. They don't do anything with what they hear. It's maddening, right? You've learned so much about your customers, and all you need to do now is go and do something with that. How do we become a CX winner? Well, in short, we act on our feedback. We act on the things that we've learned, right? And I'll just start with this. We don't just focus on the metric, right? Focusing on the metric and moving the number is what a lot of companies do. But when we focus on the metric, it's way different from focusing on what it takes to improve the customer experience. Focusing on the metric drives bad behaviors. Focusing on improving the customer experience drives and models the behaviors that we expect from our employees. So here are a couple of things that we can do. Once we've listened, empathize, and characterize, we will conduct root cause analysis. Find out what is really causing the problems and the pain points that our customers are having. We'll have some action planning sessions and some design thinking sessions. We'll do some future state mapping to redesign the experience. All of this, or a lot of this, in co-creation with our customers. We need to fix the problems. We need to redesign the experience, test the improvements, make sure we always close the loop with our customers and always close the loop with our employees. So closing the loop with the customers is going to be at the personal service recovery level and at the tactical and strategic levels. Talking about the big picture, what we did with your feedback to improve the experience. Closing the loop with our employees is really sharing the feedback with employees so they can hear the good and the bad. We use it to praise, we use it to recognize, we use it to coach employees as well. So there are a lot of things that we can do with what we've heard and learned about our customers, rather than just A, focusing on the metric, and B, just sitting on what we've learned. A key thing here is that if we put this whole continuous improvement process in place, it becomes a part of our DNA, and it just perpetuates from there. Speaking of DNA, the next CX loser behavior is failing to weave the customer into the fabric of your company. What does that mean? What does this fail mean? Customers are not being considered when you're making decisions, when you're creating new products, when you're designing new policies. And then we hear things like, well, if I focus on the customer, won't that take away from other priorities? Which makes me laugh, because it's like, isn't it all about the customer experience? Isn't it all for the customer? Isn't that what we're doing? So when we're running our companies and we're building our businesses and we're building our products and we're designing our services, it's all for the customer. So we've got to always make sure that we weave into everything that we do the voice of the customer, the impact on the customer, always asking, how does this impact the customer? What would the customer think of this? Those kinds of things. The crazy thing that I see is that companies spend money every day making changes or improvements to their business, and they don't factor the customer and the customer's needs into that. And it's really weird to me. Okay, and this is not about creating more work or adding more to your plate. You're already doing these things. So how do we become a CX winner? We're going to make sure that the customer and the customer experience are part of your DNA. How are we going to do that? We're going to look at a lot of different things throughout the organization and make sure that we always incorporate the customer's feedback, what the customer is thinking and doing and feeling into each one of these aspects. I'm going to start with the candidate experience, right? And you think, that's kind of weird, but really we know that the employee is obviously key to the customer experience. So we need to always make sure we hire the right people. So we need to take a look at our job descriptions and the interviewing process and the hiring process. Do you know how many job descriptions I've seen for customer experience positions that don't even mention the word customer? I've seen it. It's crazy. It's crazy. So, and even other job descriptions, customer facing job descriptions, you've got to make sure that the customer and your vision is mentioned throughout that candidate process, right? We've got to have that corporate and customer experience vision, because again, this is what's going to guide our employees. We've got the core values and guiding principles. We've got a brand promise. These are all things, again, that guide your employees and help them always keep the customer front and center. We're going to take that customer feedback, as I mentioned earlier, and share it with our employees and reward and recognize and coach them based on that feedback. We can develop a customer advocate program. Customer advocate program is developed for the folks in your organization who are role models for delivering great customer experiences. And then they can get what they do, or take what they do and champion that throughout the rest of the organization, or through their department, or through their business unit. And just keep talking about the customer and everything that they do. Communication. If your internal communications to your employee don't mention the customer as a reason you're doing something, or doesn't mention the impact of what that message is on the customer, then you need to fix that. I worked for Fidelity for a couple of years ago, and every time there was a message from our president, he always talked about the customer. It was so refreshing to hear that and to see that, and to talk about why we're doing these things and the impact on the customer. What a great example of always weaving the customer into your DNA. And then finally, make sure there's customer representation throughout the organization. What does that mean? I'm going to give you some examples. Most popular one, or the most famous one, I think, is that empty chair. Jeff Bezos made this popular with Amazon. In his e-staff meetings, he always has an empty chair in those meetings to represent the customer. If you've got personas, put them on the wall throughout your organization, throughout the buildings of your company. Let people see who your customers are and what their needs are and what their pain points are and what they're trying to do. Use customer cutouts. Have them throughout your buildings as well. Pictures of real customers and maybe some verbatims or some feedback from those customers. You, as a CX professional, you should be in every meeting as the advocate for your customer, talking about what the impact is on the customer. Never let a conversation go by or a meeting go by where you haven't brought up the customer. Bring real customers into meetings. I know that sounds kind of scary for some people, but real customers in meetings and conversations will certainly turn the direction of the conversation. Customer feedback, again, share that throughout the organization. Journey mapping. Journey mapping is a great exercise to get people to understand the customer, how what they do, both frontline and back office, impacts the customer. And it gets people talking and thinking about the customer experience. And create a customer room. There are a lot of great examples out there now of companies who have created these customer rooms and these customer labs that are open for employees to walk in every day to see who the customer is, what the journey is, what the current state of the experience is, feedback from customers, those kinds of things. A lot of these things can be shared even in that customer room. So, so there's some great examples of how you can make sure that the customer is always represented every day, day in and day out within your organization. All right, with that, Sam, I'm going to toss it back to you for a second.
Oh yeah, Annette, thank you so much. That is so refreshing just to hear, I mean, making it so real. I mean, and the reality, it is so real. The customer is the reason you're in business, and doing these things like you're talking about, bringing a customer into a meeting, having a customer room, having the empty chair, all that kind of stuff is just so powerful. And I think all of us get so deeply sort of embedded into our jobs that we forget that we are serving the customer. And so when you and I were putting together this presentation, I found it particularly interesting that you use the phrase, make sure customer experience is part of your DNA, because, and the reason that this slide is inserted here is that successful CX and the DNA of successful CX is something that we talk a lot about at Callidus. And this graphic is actually on the homepage of our website, of the Calidus Cloud CX website, because we also believe in exactly what you were just talking about, is that CX needs to be baked into the DNA of your organization. It can't be an add-on. It can't be a hot potato that no one really wants to own, kind of like what you were talking about earlier about, you know, quote unquote, doing CX or giving it lip service. It can't be that. It's something that everyone owns, whether you're in a customer facing role or not. And that speaks to the DNA, right? Is it really at the core of what you're doing? And now I'm not going to go into detail about the highlighted items here on this graphic, but there are, just for the record, there are both technologies and practices that help drive this DNA. Things like collecting and acting on feedback, which you've already talked about, and acting obviously being the most important part of that, and making that feedback visible across the organization, which you also mentioned. Things like making customer and employee satisfaction a true mission of the company, which you also spoke to. And even things, and this is where we get nerdy as a technology company, even things like embedded gamification, which we won't go into detail on today, but these things, if they're truly prioritized down, another very important point from the top down, they can make a huge impact on customer and employee experience. So that's all I'll say on that. But thank you for talking about the DNA.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I just did a quick.
It's got to be baked in from the inside out, as you and I both like to write about.
Yep. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I just did a quick time check too, and I just realized we're getting closer to the top of the hour than I thought we were. So I'm going to try to move a little bit faster now and get through the last couple of fails, and hopefully we'll have some time for a few questions at the end there too. So the next CX loser behavior is a failure to break down silos. This is when I looked at this picture, and I grew up on a farm, so I know all about silos, right? They were created to hold something, to separate grains so that, you know, they were separate from whatever was in the other silo, and to make something to get hard to get at. So to keep it away from predators, bad weather, those kinds of things. So to me, that sounds really, really familiar to what organizational silos do. They hold, they separate, they protect. And even worse, the focus from within organizational silos is really sort of the flavor of the day, right? It's all about them, and it's all about what that silo is working on, and that's it. Organizational silos cause pain for your employees. They lead to reduced efficiencies. They cause employees to waste resources. They kill productivity. They reduce morale, and they're really detrimental to any ability to create this customer-focused culture. And they're obviously a pain for your customers as well. Silos kill innovation, and they create a nightmare for the customer experience. So what do we need to do? Obviously, we need to get everybody moving in the same direction and get everybody working together. We need to break down these silos. So this is an interesting thing to think about. The silo is really more of a mentality than a physical thing. I know we always picture them with these big concrete or metal silos or structures, right? But in an organization, there is no wall. There's nothing to keep you from talking to, you know, you're sitting in the marketing department. There's nothing to keep you from talking to the person in, you know, in support or in sales or wherever. There's no physical wall separating you. Departments and business unit heads choose to not share information or to not collaborate, and that feeds down and bleeds down into their organizations. So we need to change that mentality. So let's think about some tools that we can use to help to break down those silos. The first one is journey mapping. If you know me, you know I love to talk about journey mapping. By definition, journey mapping involves cross-functional stakeholders. It really has. Again, it's a journey. It's if you think about, for example, a support experience, that support experience didn't just happen at that call center, at the call to that customer service representative. That experience happened long before, when marketing messaging was off, sales sold something that didn't do what the customer expected it to do. The product team designed a product that was defective, whatever it was. So this is where the cross-functional and the data sharing and having everybody involved in journey mapping really helps to break down the silos and get people talking and thinking together and collaborating about, yeah, this is a broader problem than just what's happening here at the support desk. Governance, having a governance or a steering committee in place. That CX governance structure is huge to helping to break down silos, because that governance structure and that committee that oversees your CX initiatives is a cross-functional team. And there need to be champions from across the organization, from across different departments involved in those steering committee meetings, and making sure that they champion and drive on a consistent basis across the entire organization what we're trying to do down into their organizations. We can use communications and collaboration technology, so we need to put systems in place that allow employees to share information, learnings, and more across their departments and business units. Putting technology in place that facilitates and encourages communication and collaboration. Really, collaboration is what we need to start doing. We need to get people to start working together, right? And again, it's a culture shift. It's a change in a mindset shift, and it has to come from the top. So leadership needs to improve cross-functional organization-wide communications and interactions. They must be organization-wide. They can't be unique to each department and to each department situation. They need to share stories and acknowledge successes about cross-team collaboration across the entire organization. Everybody should be working toward a common goal, speaking the same language and using the common vocabulary when it comes to the customer and the customer experience. And anytime there are incentives that are tied to the customer experience, they need to be the same from department to department. They can't be unique from one department versus another. So we need to start just doing things in a more cohesive manner. So the next CX loser behavior is failure to prioritize the employee experience. Quite simply, without employees, you have no customer experience. When I gave you my definition of what a CX loser is, I didn't include a lack of focus on employees and the knowledge that employees deliver and drive the customer experience. Because for me, and coming from me, that's a given, but I know that as a CX loser organization, they don't know that that is the case. CX loser organizations still sit there and go, oh, we'll focus on the employees later, right? We'll focus on them later. Employee and customer focus requires a real shift in the culture. It takes having the right people in the right jobs and training them to do the right thing. And while that might sound simple, it's not always as easy as that. All right, one more chart. This is another great example of why we need to be CX winners, right? And why we need to focus on the employee experience. Another bit of research done by John Picoult at Watermark Consulting. He basically did the same thing as he did with CX leaders and laggers, except this time he looked at employees and took a look at companies that had fallen into the Great Place to Work findings or had been on the Great Places to Work list, and compared their performance to the S&P 500 over the last 18 years. Once again, no surprise, their annualized returns outperformed the market by nearly double. How do we design a great employee experience? It's really no different from designing a customer experience, right? It's the same kinds of things. It's listen, it's characterize, it's map, it's understand, it's act, it's continuously improve. It's all the same kinds of things. We just shift the audience, right? So it's the same work that we need to do. Sometimes it falls with the CX team, or they share in some of the responsibilities and the work that are done around the employee experience, especially as it relates to delivering a great customer experience. But usually it falls under HR or the VP of people or the whoever heads up your human resources initiatives. So we need to design a great experience, build an awesome culture, and make your company the best place to work. Hire the right people, give them the right tools and training, provide feedback, make them feel like and know what it feels like to know that your work matters, appreciate them, recognize them, most importantly, invest in them and develop them. Those are key. And know the language. This is an important thing too. There are a lot of employee terms out there. You know, there's experience, engagement, satisfaction, happiness, culture, workplace. They're all different and they're all important. So really know the difference between each one of those. And I could sit here for an hour and talk about those. That would be a whole different webinar. So All right, Sam, one more time, coming back to you.
Oh yeah, and I just for our attendees here, I don't, I'm not going to get salesy, and we're not going to tout our products in any way, but I just wanted to make our attendees aware that there actually are tools out there to make it easier to do the things that Annette is talking about. We've recently at Calidus, we've developed some really cool solutions lately with names like Sales Motivate and Service Motivate, that companies, and you can see here even in the graphic, that companies are integrating right into things like their Salesforce platform, which is what you can see on your screen, and other enterprise platform that actually drive those kind of behaviors that Annette's talking about, that drive engagement and performance, and make it really natural within solutions that people are already using day in and day out. So just very briefly, so research has shown that like really simple things, like as Annette mentioned, like sharing real-time customer feedback with employees is actually a super positive driver to performance. People want to know how they're doing. And when they do know how they're doing, they actually tend to want to do better. And that old school thinking of, well, let's not tell the service agent, what customers say about her, that is not a driver of positive performance. People actually get very anxious and nervous when they don't know how they're doing. And so things like sharing that real-time feedback, even as a tech company, and things like embedding gamification into the systems and the various workflows that people are using day to day. Actually, fostering friendly competition has shown to be a really positive driver and a driver of positive employee experience. Things like rewarding people publicly, which actually, Annette, you mentioned earlier as well, like rewarding and noting people for their accomplishments. They actually do better, when they say, hey, I had a great week, I had a great day, I had a great month. So these are sort of obvious things in terms of human psychology that makes sense to all of us. But using a technology like some of the stuff that we've just developed at Calidus, the technology just weaves, as Annette mentioned earlier about weaving the customer into the fabric of the company, using these kinds of technologies, it just weaves these types of things into people's daily work. And it makes it easier for managers or for an organization to actually be consistent in making sure that we're positively motivating people to do their best. And that's all I'll say about that, Annette.
Okay, no, that was awesome. That was awesome.
It's so cool.
Right.
The fact that, and I love that, the fact that we are actually, developing these technologies, that it's such a positive. It's just making people enjoy their work more and do better and feel better. And this is good. It's a win-win. It's a win-win for the employee and for the organization and for the customer.
I love that. I love that. I love that you guys are focusing on the employee, because that's, as we know, it's huge. It's huge. Okay, next one. I'm going to go really fast through these last three. Don't want to not give them their due time here, but I know we're getting close here, so I'm going to go a little bit faster through these last three. So the next CX loser behavior is failure to question current state. CX losers are complacent. We've always done it this way. That's just the way we do things around here. Those are their favorite statements, right? And I think that those statements are culture killers. They're innovation killers. They're employee experience killers. They're customer experience killers. Why? Because companies change, employees change, customers change, new competitors enter the market. So we need to regularly revisit our rules, our policies, our processes, our approaches, whatever we're doing, so that we ensure that we're delivering a great experience to both our employees and our customers. How to become a CX winner? We just need to constantly question everything. Seriously, that is the bottom line. If we question everything, if we ask why we're still doing things this way, we get to learn more about our customers and our employees and better understand their needs. We can learn about our partners and the market and the emerging trends. It gives us a chance to ideate and innovate, collaborate, work together. If we're all questioning, don't be afraid to ask. Don't be afraid to ask, why is this policy in place? Why are we still talking using these scripts? Why do we make customers jump through 7 hoops to do that? Those are the kinds of things that allow you to create better products. And then also eliminate processes and policies that are harmful to the experience. ultimately, when we question everything, we can change how we do business for the better. Next CX loser behavior, failing to define and measure success. So you're starting on this journey, but you haven't defined what the end game is, haven't defined your outcome. I'm going to tell you a quick little story from Alice in Wonderland, an exchange between Alice and the Cheshire Cat. Alice says, "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" "That depends a good deal on where you want to go," said the cat. "I don't much care where," said Alice. "Then it doesn't matter which way you go," said the cat. "So long as I get somewhere," Alice added as an explanation. "Oh, sure. You're sure to do that," said the cat, "if only you walk long enough." So if you don't know where you're going, how will you know when you get there, right? Yeah, you can just keep going, but how do you know when you've gotten there? How do you know when you've achieved customer experience success? How do you know when you have become a CX winner? So you need to define that. How do we become a winner? Consider these things, right? How will you track success of your CX improvement initiatives? How do you track it? Do you even do that now? What does success look like, and what do those metrics look like? What metrics are you tracking? Are they the ones that matter most to your business or to your customers? For the business, have you defined outcomes? It's crazy to even talk about metrics if you haven't defined what your desired outcomes are. And once you've defined those outcomes, have you aligned the metrics to know when you've achieved those outcomes? You need to include things that are specific and measurable. Think about things that different ways that you can measure process improvements, cost efficiencies, culture change, customer retention. Those should be part of your critical KPIs, right? For the customer, what are those metrics? What does that look like for the customer experience? Some of the things that you want to measure in terms of the improved experience might be, increased satisfaction, reduced effort, first call resolution, those kinds of things. Those are some of the metrics that you need to think about this from both the business perspective and the customer perspective. Okay, last CX loser behavior, failing to realize that this is a journey. It is a journey in two different ways. Number one, it's never ending, it's ongoing. Remember I said earlier, it's persistence. It's all about persistence. We just got to keep going. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. The other way to think about the journey is that from the customer perspective. It's not just about touch points. Journey thinking, not touch point thinking. Touch point thinking leads to siloed and inconsistent experiences being designed. We've got to think about the journey. We've got to think about this the experience more holistically. How do we become a CX winner? I'll let you read the bullet points there about how McKinsey, reports that companies that are journey focused, they've got these attributes, but I'll just throw a couple things out there real quick. Map the journey. Again, I'm a huge fan of journey mapping, right? So help everyone understand that the experience doesn't just happen at that one touch point. Remember the example I gave earlier about support, right? We have cross-functional representation in the room when we're mapping a journey, because the journey or the experience does not just happen at that particular interaction. Something happened upstream that caused something to happen downstream, right? So we need to make sure that we think about the entire journey. And then use journey analytics, use data and analytics to identify moments of failure as well as key moments of truth along the journey. And then keep listening and understanding. Customer needs change, business evolves, industry grows, new trends emerge, new customers rise, new competitors come, old ones go, right? So it's like a cross-country journey. Sometimes your plans may change, but you got to stick with it, right? So those are just a couple of different things that you can do to think about the journey. One of the things that I like here that McKinsey mentions is that they're bringing together all of their data, all of their different customer data from across the journey, across the organization, to think about the customer and get that single view of the customer as well. So, all right. Real quick, wrapping up, how do we get onto that CX winners list? It's a lot of work, as I just went through, and trust me, there are more than those 9 things. I probably could have done twice as many in this webinar, but as you can see, we're already running out of time. And so there are way more than that, but those are some of the foundational elements that you've got to have in place to become a CX winner. Why? Here's some of the benefits and some of the outcomes when you're a CX winner. You get to report reduced churn, increased retention, increased brand preference, stronger relationships with your customers, a reduction in sales cycles, which your salespeople will thank you for, new business from existing customers, process improvements and efficiencies, new products, new features that meet your customers' needs, recommendations and referrals from your customers, reduce sales and marketing costs because now your customers are selling for you, culture changes that support this winner status, and greater shareholder returns. We can't talk about this without talking about the shareholder, but I like to put them at the end. So those are the benefits of becoming a CX winner. What's next? What are some of the things that you should walk away from this session today? A couple of different things. Assess where your organization is today. What are you doing today? What's missing? How are you doing on the key elements that I just mentioned that we talked about today? Listen to your employees and customers. What's important to them? What jobs are they trying to do, and how well are you helping them do that? Define and communicate your CX vision. Make sure everyone understands it. Define your success metrics. If we achieve that vision, what will it look like? How are we going to measure that? Understand the current state of both experiences. Don't forget about the employees. Make sure you put a key focus on your employees and their experience. Act on your findings. Act on what you uncover. Make sure you do something with all that feedback and the data and the learning. Analyze it, socialize it, operationalize it. Question everything. Don't get stuck in a rut. Don't believe that status quo is the best way to go because your customers are telling you otherwise. Remember that perception gap, right? Your customers are telling you otherwise. Don't be okay with that's how we've always done it around here. And remember that it's a journey. Think about the experience holistically, not just at the touch point level. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And I always like to say that, you know, again, persistence, it's about the baby steps. So keep fighting the good fight. All right, with that, I thank you for your time. I know we're right up against the top of the hour. I think we may actually already be over, but I'm happy to answer any questions about what I've talked about here today. Feel free to reach out to me. My email address is here, Annette@cx-journey.com. You can find me on Twitter @AnnetteFranz. Happy to answer or help you in any way that I can. And with that, Sam, I don't know if we have any time for Q&A, but happy to take any questions if we have them.
Well, I mean, first of all, thank you everyone for staying on. And Annette and I have pushed through this hour because there's just so much to talk about here. And again, as I said earlier, it's just such a juicy subject and there's a lot to say. I think, Annette, we're over the time. There have been a couple of questions that have come through that I can kind of group up. I think let's very, very quickly leave it to, I'm going to ask you 2 questions and there's been a theme in some of the questions. And so let me very briefly, and then we're going to wrap it. So the first sort of area of question that has the most feedback is being one of these, as you call, voluntold people that have, that parts of CX have been rolled into people's jobs, and various questions around, like, it used to be maybe marketing owned CX, maybe customer service owned CX, all this kind of stuff. Just very quickly, how do you get everyone on the same page? If you've been voluntold that you own.
That's a good question. First thing is to get that CX vision in place, because that certainly gets everybody on the same page. Well, I'll throw out a couple of suggestions, and these are a couple of them are personal, sort of career-wise. Read. Share. You know, if there are several of you within the organization, get out there and attend webinars like this. Read the Ultimate Question Series books. Read Outside In. Read Gene Bliss's books about Chief Customer Officer. Sign up for blogs and newsletters. There is no shortage of customer experience resources out there to get you up and running and informed about all things customer experience. Join the CXPA, the Customer Experience Professional Association. There's a lot of great resources and a lot of great people who will help you if you need help getting on your voluntold job. Trust me, I've spoken to a lot of people in the organization who have exactly that. On more of an organizational level, a couple of high-level thoughts, right? My first question would be, do you have executive commitment? How did you get put into that role? Where did the decision come from that you need to do CX? Because if you don't have that, that's the first place we need to start, and to get everybody on the same page. Again, make sure there's a vision in place. Develop a governance structure. Again, it's that cross-functional team, and get everybody across the organization working together for this common goal, and working together after you've sort of educated and brought yourself up to speed on what this CX thing is, working together to share knowledge, share feedback, share information, and work together to get the ball rolling. There are a lot of other great, and if anybody's got specific questions on that, feel free to reach out to me, but there are a lot of other great ideas on how to get everybody on the same page.
Great, and thank you. And the other topic that we've seen questions on, and we'll wrap on this, but I think we should probably do another webinar on this, is the whole subject of journey mapping. Is something that, I mean, it's just sort of a great mystery, I think, to a lot of people. And so very, very quickly, and just we really do need to do a whole separate session on this. And we will be, by the way, those of you who are still hanging on, if you're coming to our C3 conference in Vegas in September, we actually are bringing the CXPA in to actually help our customers work with journey mapping. So if you are planning on attending C3, you know, bring your notepad, because we're going to be guiding people on how to do this. But just, Annette, just last comments on journey mapping, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Okay. Yeah, you know what? The key thing about journey mapping is that you've got to do something with them, right? You've got to create make sure you've got the process right, that you're doing them right, so that you can take action on them. And there's a whole, again, I know we don't have time, and like you said, it's a whole webinar on its own, but there's a whole host of ways that you can make them actionable. And then you got to go and do something with them. They're not just pretty pictures. They're not just something that's going to hang on the wall, never to be used again. They are great aha moments for sure, but you need to take what you learn from those maps and do something with them. And there's a whole host of rules and principles that go into how to do that, to make sure that that the maps will actually be the catalyst for change.
Thank you so much. And Annette, thank you for your always, you know, interesting, and your depth of wisdom on this stuff. We appreciate it so much. And thank you, attendees, for holding on past a full hour. We really appreciate your interest. And I'm going to close this out. Please, as Annette had already put up her contact information earlier, please, you know, reach out to Annette if you actually want specific help for your organization. If you're interested in some of the solutions that we were talking about that make, you know, some of these initiatives easier via technology, please then reach out to us at Calidus Cloud. And with that, a final thank you for our patient attendees and to our wonderful Annette Franz, and we will close out. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending.